Hello, see you again with Brainfactor channel. This time we will discuss animals in space NASA. Watch the video carefully and don't skip this video. And please help subscribe and like our channel. Thank you. Animals in space NASA. There have been more species sent into space than there have been people. In the early days of space travel, all manner of living things, ranging from rats to apes, were stowed away aboard rockets and propelled beyond the atmosphere of Earth into the unexplored waters of space. After they returned to Earth, the astronauts' psychological effects as well as the physiological alterations that occurred in their bodies were investigated in order to comprehend the effect that exposure to space had on living tissues. The majority of them did not make it back alive. Laika, the world's first space dog, is a name that many of us are familiar with. On the other hand, there were many more before her. Before there were rockets, people used hot air balloons to launch animals into the atmosphere to test their ability to endure the low temperatures and high altitude. Following the conclusion of the Second World War, the United States carried out a number of unmanned high-altitude balloon flights with passengers consisting of animals other than humans. These passengers included mice, hamsters, guinea pigs, cats, dogs, frogs, goldfish, and monkeys. The first successful animal flight took place in September 1950 and involved 8 white mice. The mice were placed in a pressurized capsule, carried to an altitude of 97,000 feet, and then returned to land without suffering any injuries after 3 hours and 40 minutes. At the same time, investigations into rockets were being carried out in the laboratory. On February 20, 1947, the United States successfully released fruit flies aboard a German V-2 rocket that they had captured. The rocket reached an altitude of 109 kilometers above the Earth, surpassing the threshold of space that was previously defined as 100 kilometers. After being evacuated from the spacecraft, the capsule that was carrying the fruit flies successfully returned to Earth with the assistance of a parachute. The fruit flies were found in good health after being lost. A rhesus monkey by the name of Albert II was launched into space in June of 1949, after a gap of 2 years, reaching an altitude of 134 kilometers. Unfortunately, Albert II did not survive the re-entry process because his parachute did not open properly. During the 1950s and 1960s, a number of monkeys were successfully launched into space. The anxiety that would have been caused by being confined in such a small place was mitigated for many of them by the use of sedatives. Roughly 2/3 of them did not make it through the ordeal alive. Additionally, the Russians have sent animals into space, most commonly dogs. Before Yuri Gagarin made his famous journey on April 12, 1961, a large number of dogs were successfully transported on missions that did not reach orbit. One of them was named Laika. Laika was killed within a few hours after their takeoff due to an issue with the thermal control system that resulted in the cabin reaching dangerously high temperatures. Her death was brutally agonizing. Abel and Baker, 2 squirrel monkeys, became the first monkeys to survive the experience of traveling through space in 1959. They were secured inside a teeny canister that had been inserted into the Jupiter rocket's nose cone. They achieved an altitude of 480 kilometers, endured 38 gs, and remained weightless for 9 minutes. After they got back, Baker became a famous person and was featured in an issue of Life magazine. He also performed for children who went to the United States Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Her traveling companion Abel, who had survived the flight itself, passed away a few days later while undergoing surgery to have an infected electrode removed from his body. Miss Baker lived until 1984. Throughout the 1960s, there were still experiments conducted in space with animals. During this time period, a wide range of different animals were sent into space. This included chimpanzees, cats, rabbits, wasps, beetles, frogs, and tortoises, among other animals. The tortoises were the first animals other than humans to complete a circumnavigation of the Moon. On September 14, 1968, the Soviet Union successfully launched a pair of tortoises into space alongside other biological specimens such as mealworms, wineflies, and other insects. In June of 1969, a month before humans set foot on the moon, the first attempt at a mission with a lengthy duration was made. In order to study the physiological effects of a protracted trip into space, a macaque was sent into orbit around the Earth for a period of 30 days. He was instructed in how to use a dispenser that dispensed food pellets for himself. But after about a week into the mission, the animal started acting lethargic, and his health started to deteriorate, so researchers had no choice but to bring him back down to Earth. He passed on the following day. The crew of the 17th and final Apollo mission carried 5 mice with them and gave them the names Faye, Phi, Fo, Thumb, and Fui. The crew members were Eugene Cernan, Harrison Schmitt, and Ronald Evans. The mice were a part of an experiment known as the Biological Cosmic Ray Experiment, also known as BioCore, the purpose of which was to investigate whether or not deep space cosmic rays cause damage to the brain, eyes, skin, and other tissues in the body. The pocket mouse, also known as the Parognathus longimembris, was selected as the test subject due to its ability to adapt to adverse conditions despite its diminutive size. They do not need water to survive and do not naturally store food, so it is possible to give them all of their nutritional needs at once. In addition to this, they produce highly concentrated waste products. The mice had tiny radiation detectors implanted under their scalps, and then they were placed in a closed, self-sustaining package and taken aboard the Apollo 17 command module. The mice were provided with enough food to last them for the entirety of the mission. One of the 5 animals most likely passed away before the mission even began for reasons that are currently unknown. After completing their mission, the remaining 6 astronauts became the final humans from Earth to orbit the Moon and return safely to Earth. They were accompanied by 3 American astronauts. Ronald Evans, the command module pilot for Apollo 17, and his 4 rodent crewmates set a new record by completing a total of 75 orbits of the Moon during the mission's duration, which was the longest of any Apollo mission. Their stay of 148 hours in lunar orbit is still the record for the longest time anyone has spent there. As soon as the mice landed back on the surface of the Earth, they were rushed into the operating room to be dissected. The autopsy revealed that the mice's brains, eye retinas, and other organs had not sustained any significant damage. The long list of animals that have been to the Moon expanded in the 1970s to include fishes and spiders. In 1975, several tortoises set a new record by spending a total of 90 days in space aboard a spacecraft called Soyuz. The 1980s saw the launch of the first spacecraft carrying newts. In a later mission, some of the newt's front limbs were amputated in order to conduct research on the rate at which tissue regenerates in space. The unique ability of newts to regenerate lost limbs and even repair injuries to the heart, brain, eyes, and spinal cord is one of their most remarkable traits. Crickets, mice, rats, frogs, newts, fruit flies, snails, carp, rice fish, oyster toadfish, sea urchins, swordtail fish, gypsy moth eggs, stick insect eggs, brine shrimp, quail eggs, and jellyfish had all been launched into space by the time the late 1990s rolled around. Silkworms, garden orb spiders, carpenter bees, harvester ants, and Japanese killifish were on board the spacecraft Columbia for its final mission. The manifest also included Japanese killifish. When the wreckage of the shuttle that crashed was examined, researchers discovered living nematodes that had been used in a previous experiment. Bigelow Aerospace, a private American company, was the one responsible for sending the indestructible cockroach into space for the very first time in 2006. Even though they were a part of a separate experiment, the cockroaches were used in the testing of an experimental space habitat that was called Genesis I. In 2007, the European Space Agency took the hardy tardigrade and put them in a vacuum for 10 days to simulate what it would be like to be in space. The tardigrades made a miracle survival. During the same mission, a number of cockroaches were transported inside a container that was sealed, and, as might be expected, at least one of the females became pregnant while the cockroaches were in transit. By the 21st century, the use of living organisms in space exploration had long since become routine. The effects of microgravity on the body's physiological processes, such as the loss of muscle and bone, as well as how sleep schedules responded to the stress of being in space, were studied using mice, geckos, and other animals. This was done in order to gain a better understanding of the topic. Experiments with mice suggested that a physically active lifestyle would be necessary in space to prevent skeletal and muscular atrophy and weakness. In spite of the fact that NASA is making preparations to send a manned mission to the Moon in 2024 and may one day send a crew on a deep space mission to Mars, there is still a great deal that can be discovered about the effects of ionizing radiation on the human body during extended periods of time spent in space. It is never too late to remember the researchers whose groundbreaking work will enable future astronauts to travel the vast and hostile expanse of space, as well as the great service that monkeys such as Miss Baker and little rodents such as Fei, Fo, Thumb, and Fui have rendered towards the achievement of this objective. Well, that's all for this video about animals in space, NASA. If you want something to be corrected, please fill it in the comments column, okay? Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to help subscribe, like and comment, so that we are even more excited to make other interesting videos. Bye.